Hello and welcome back to GP Video Podcast by Nadia. Today the topic is type 1 diabetes mellitus versus type 2 diabetes mellitus. I know that in previous few of my podcasts we have spoken about few aspects of type 2 diabetes, but this time in this video I would like to concentrate on the differences between type 1 diabetes versus type 2 diabetes. Now, what is diabetes number 1? For those of you who have missed my previous video podcasts, diabetes is one of the most chronic conditions, chronic health conditions in the developed countries. But what is diabetes exactly? It starts with insulin, a hormone made in your pancreas that helps your body use sugar. So, KNAPS, I don't know if it's SNAPS or KNAPS, somebody, a medical expert, explains it very well, so I would like to quote his own words. Glucose is a good thing to have in your body, but it has to get into our body cells in order to give us energy. So while glucose is a very good constituent, glucose is something that we need to be alive because it gives us energy. But for glucose to work, it is important for glucose to enter from bloodstream into the cells. And insulin is that tool. Insulin is that hormone which is secreted by our pancreas, which helps get insulin into our body cells from the blood. So glucose starts in the bloodstream and insulin acts as a key that unlocks the doors of the cells. It allows glucose to get out of our bloodstream and into our cells. So people with diabetes fall into one of the two camps. Number one is either their bodies don't make any insulin, which is type 1 diabetes mellitus, or number two is their bodies have a hard time using the insulin which is being made. So insulin is being made, but either it is ineffective or inefficient, or the body cells are ineffective or inefficient to take up that insulin. So this is the number one difference among type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. So the number two difference is about its prevalence, how common it is. Type 1 diabetes affects about 1.3 million people in the developed countries, while type 2 diabetes affects about 37 million people in the developed countries. So type 2 diabetes is much more prevalent than type 1 diabetes. 1.3 million is the figure for type 1 diabetes and 37 million is the figure for type 2 diabetes. Why does it happen? Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition, while type 2 diabetes is a hormonal condition. Does your body make insulin? That was the first difference that I said. In type 1 diabetes, no, your body does not make insulin. And in type 2 diabetes, yes, it does make insulin, especially in the first years, like say first 5 to 10 years. But then once the insulin resistance develops, and then the insulin resistance develops to such a state that, even the oral medications are not helping, then we go up to insulin. So type 2 diabetics, if they do not well control their diabetes at one stage, maybe in 5 to 10 years, do become insulin dependent as well. And that is called insulin dependent type 2 diabetes. But initially, for 5 to 10 years at least, they can go on hypoglycemic agents, which could be oral or could be injectables. Like for example, Ozempic and Mounjaro, these are injectable oral injectable hypoglycemic agents, which are injectables. They are not insulin. They are injectable hypoglycemic agents. So hypoglycemic agents are initially used in type 2 diabetes, including metformin and other 3 to 4 groups of hypoglycemic agents. There are, I think, 4 to 5 groups of hypoglycemic agents at this stage, which include both oral agents and injectable agents. Then risk factors. Risk factors in type 1 diabetes, we don't know yet what causes type 1 diabetes. Family history can slightly increase your risk, as there are a number of genes linked to type 1 diabetes, while type 2 diabetes is quite easily linked with family history. Type 2 diabetes has two kinds of risk factors, modifiable and non-modifiable. Non-modifiable risk factors include your age, family history, ethnicity, and sometimes gender as well. So family history is strongly linked in type 2 diabetes, but not that strongly linked in type 1 diabetes, though it is one of the risk factors in both of them. While in type 2 diabetes, the modifiable risk factors include your obesity, being overweight, having high blood pressure, having high cholesterol, being not physically active, being, having a sedentary lifestyle. All of these risk factors, which are the cardiac risk factors, which are responsible for cardiac death, can to some extent contribute to developing or being a risk factor for type 2 diabetes as well, especially obesity and no physical activity, and waist circumference. Waist circumference is also very important, and living style, lifestyle, and all of these kind of stuff, which are related to cardiac death as well. So do you need to take insulin? Yes, in type 1 diabetes, absolutely you do need to take insulin. And as I said before, in type 2 diabetes, after 5 to 10 years, if you do not control your lifestyle factors, you do not control your diet, you do not control your physical activities and be more active and exercise and be more physically active, and do not use oral or injectable hypoglycemic agents, then at one stage you will start taking insulin as well. Can it affect kids? Yes, type 1 diabetes often as young as 4 to 6 years old. Type 2 diabetes, yes, it can also affect kids, but it is more likely in adults, but it's becoming more common in kids and teens and middle-aged adults now. So, the symptoms for type 1 appear more quickly. So the symptoms for type 1, usually how do we diagnose type 1 diabetes is, unfortunately, these people usually end up in the emergency department and with DKA, a condition called diabetic ketoacidosis, very sick. And then hence we diagnose type 1 diabetes. There was a 52 years old lady that I dealt with in emergency department. That was her first presentation with diabetes ketoacidosis. And she was like, for the first time, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 52. So it's not rare to be diagnosed with type 1 diabetes above the age of 50 as well. But usually they are diagnosed at a younger age and with much severe problems, especially ending up in the emergency department. While symptoms for type 2 diabetes are easier to miss because they appear more slowly. Usually they are diagnosed when we are doing a surveillance HbA1c, or we are doing a surveillance fasting glucose levels, insulin levels, and HbA1c, and that's how they are diagnosed. Or they are coming up with kidney disease or heart disease or vascular disease or nerve disease, and that's how they are diagnosed. So symptoms appear much more slowly and we may not be aware of them. We'll continue with that tomorrow.